Well, I think what we see is that engagement with local media, strong local media presence, increases civic engagement. So there's less voting in places where the local newspapers are gone. And that's really the heart of democracy, is that local level of engagement. That's where you're really able to affect the most change. If all you're doing is watching national news, and especially to Jonathan's point, national news from the perspective of national news, not from the perspective of your local community, it feels almost like entertainment.
Welcome to Pod Talks. Pod Talks is a project of protecting our democracy. We bring together the best minds in New Jersey and beyond to talk about some of the biggest challenges facing our democracy, our institutions, and our personal freedoms. I'm Sean Spiller, Chair of Protecting Our Democracy. Today I'm honored to have three impressive guests to discuss the role of the free press in our democracy. Jonathan Salant, who has over 4 decades experience as a reporter, has developed some of the most interesting coverage of national politics in Washington, D.C. Jonathan has the distinction of being the last reporter to cover national politics for New Jersey media outlets until recently, when New Jersey Advanced Media decided to end their Washington, D.C. coverage, something I know we all want to talk about in just a little bit. Jonathan is an award-winning political reporter, former president of the National Press Club and the Regional Reporters Association, and is a member of the Standing Committee of Correspondence, the group of congressional reporters that oversees the House and Senate press galleries. He's a graduate of the State University of New York at Stony Brook and of Columbia University's Graduate School of Journalism. Welcome, Jonathan, and thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Amanda Richardson is the executive director of the Corporation for New Jersey Local Media. Amanda is an experienced lawyer and co-founder of Resource Equity, a U.S.-based international nonprofit focused on empowering women. Amanda joined the Corporation of New Jersey Local Media in 2020 and has brought her experience in community engagement and empowerment to her work at a critical moment in the life of journalism and media. Amanda lives in Harding Township with her husband Matthew and her son Henry. Thank you, Amanda, for joining us. I know you got much to offer from this topic. I appreciate seeing you at the Bird King dinner as well. That was fun. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Joseph Lee is the general manager of NJPBS. Joe comes to New Jersey PBS with decades of experience in media, especially radio. A Baltimore native, Joe ran a non-commercial radio station in its digital platforms at Syracuse University for 28 years, first as program director and then as director and general manager. Prior to that, Joe transformed the music-oriented radio station to a public media organization focused on multimedia journalism, storytelling, and community impact at Morgan State University. Joe's brought his experience to NJPBS and has been working to elevate the New Jersey-based public media to new heights with a commitment to community engagement and that storytelling. Welcome as well. Good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you all for being part of this conversation today. I think it's pretty timely. We all know, certainly with much going on. So maybe I'd start with kind of a broad question that I think each of you brings your own perspectives to. I guess how would you characterize right now the current state of journalism in New Jersey, especially when it comes to whether it be local coverage, state coverage, regional, national, obviously, all different areas of focus, but we're seeing, the challenges that media is facing on all those levels. So what's your perspective on what our current state is? Maybe, Jonathan, maybe I'll start with you.
Well, New Jersey is unique in the fact that it doesn't have any television station assigned. Channel 13 originally was assigned to Newark, New Jersey, and it moved to New York. Channel 9 now is in Jersey, but it's still not a locally owned station here. But overall, so a lot of it will depend on either everybody in Jersey either knows about Philadelphia news or New York City news. In terms of the local paper, New Jersey's the same winds that have blown across the country, where the local newspapers have cut back. People don't want to pay for news. They want to get it for free online. Advertising is drying up. When you think about when I was growing up, you had Macy's and Gimbels and Gertz and Bamberger's, which is owned by Macy's, and Corvettes and A&S, and now there's Macy's. So that's 4 or 5 newspapers, department stores that used to take out 2, 3, 4, 5 pages of ads. They're all gone. And if it's not being made up, readers and advertising is moving online, and the papers are cutting back to make up for the loss of revenue.
Oh, it makes sense. And maybe, Amanda, maybe I'll go to you. Has that impacted at all levels, maybe in the same way or different when we talk about local or regional or national politics? Is that impact that Jonathan's talking about felt evenly, or a little bit of a different challenge at different levels?
So we focus on local news, on preserving local news, and civic engagement at the local level. So I can talk about that a little bit, just to echo what Jonathan was saying, which is, what's happening in the U.S. as a whole, with about 50% of journalists have been cut since 2004, newspapers closing, is happening in New Jersey. We've seen the big dailies have stopped covering at the local level. And then at the same time, the local news is really still the most trusted news. So it's so important to protect. And I keep saying it is dying. Yes, the economics are changing. Advertising is going away, but it is also, I say, actively being murdered, or the demise is being speeded up both by hedge funds and also by chains that are taking a bottom line view. I think that we kind of need to rethink the view of the news and not focus on a bottom line economic view, but really think about it as a public good that needs to be protected.
So, Joe, I'm going to you, and you've got that state perspective, obviously, and especially where you are now. So maybe you could shine a little light there and what your take is on just the state, and if you feel that it's being, attacked, and certainly some of the challenges that media is facing overall.
You broke up a little bit there, so I think I got the gist of what you're talking about. As a newcomer here, I've been in this state for about a year and a half now, really getting to understand the landscape a bit. It is challenging when you are in a state that doesn't have a defined media market, as we just heard about the New York and Philadelphia focus. Having news organizations, going across the state, trying to cover important issues, delivering important information to readers, viewers, listeners. It's really challenging in this day and age in terms of organizations not having the resources to cover an entire state, getting hyper-focused in certain areas with varying degrees of how we cover those. What we're trying to do at NJPBS and NJ Spotlight News is really begin to focus our attention on the big issues that we think New Jerseyans want to focus on, whether it is infrastructure, environment, education. So we're and that I think is a good effort in terms of trying to reach and serve reach people and serve their needs. But there's so much other information and information needs that communities have that there should be some coordinated, focused effort on how we bring all of these collective efforts from organizations like NJPBS, hyperlocal organizations, and other news organizations, having some collaboration and conversation about these big issues and how we go about covering them, I think could be very, very helpful.
Well, Joe, maybe I'll stick with you and kind of go in a couple other places. The first one is really around when you talk about storytelling a lot in what you do, right? Mm-hmm. But as you're just describing right now, when you're telling the news, which is still what's happening, I granted a little different than just the storytelling, but right now everyone's competing with social media, right? Everyone's competing with people getting an alert on your phone and you're just reading the top headline, right, or something along those lines. How do you see you competing with drawing people's attention, right? So they say, no, let's listen to this coverage. Let's make sure you're understanding what's happening. I know you guys are working across a number of platforms.
Yep.
You've got to be in these spaces, but how has that really changed things as well, the impact of social media specifically?
Well, it changes your focus. We are not going to be in the business of trying to pull people away from these other platforms to pay attention to us. We need to be on those platforms and delivering news and information in ways that they are consuming it. We being the WNET group just went through a pretty extensive an audience survey and some focus group studies and looking at how people are accessing video content and news and information. And the number of people in particular age groups below, say, 60, are accessing a lot of news and information through platforms that you wouldn't normally consider, like Instagram. We do know that a lot of people access through Twitter, but TikTok. So the question for us is how do we effectively deliver news and information specifically designed for those platforms to growing numbers of people that we are collecting and begin to build audience with on those various platforms. And that is the challenge right now, is to not just be there, but be there and do it effectively.
Well, Amanda, I might go to you. Part of what, Joe noting that you've got to be in those spaces to kind of share the news in those spaces. One of the things we're seeing, though, is a lot of social media companies getting criticism for only pushing the content that they know people are effectively clicking on or want to see, and then you see more of it. How does that become a challenge when you're trying to be in these spaces, you're trying to put the news across in an unbiased way, but we're seeing the polarization, I guess, that we're seeing, especially social media, where you're getting different versions of information depending on what an algorithm says. So how do you work in that space when you're trying to bring forward local news coverage?
Yeah, I think a difficulty there for us is not just, we have, we're on all the major social media platforms. And I should say, I run the nonprofit, which is the Corporation for New Jersey Local Media, and we own a chain of 14 local papers in 4 counties in New Jersey. So that's what I'm referring to when I'm talking about social media. Each of those papers has their own social media, etc. But we're also behind a paywall because the economics just don't work out for us if we're not behind a paywall. And so what you'll see is somebody posts a link to us on social media and people say, oh, I can't read that, I don't subscribe. And they don't subscribe, they just complain that it's behind a paywall. So I think, we've got a problem that's even a step removed from getting people to view us on these social media platforms, which is that people don't want to pay to access the news. Which, there's a lot of ways we could go about combating that. One thing we're doing that I actually think is interesting is kind of trying to take not the opposite approach, but a different approach where we're going deeper. So we have a solutions journalism collaborative that we're working on in part with Spotlight, where we're taking one topic and going really deep into it with a bunch of other media organizations, including Spotlight. What we've heard from readers is that they're really appreciating that kind of deep dive into the news. So almost taking it away from that hot take with social media atmosphere and giving people the in-depth coverage that you really want professional journalists doing.
Jonathan, maybe to you, and maybe what Amanda just noted, I think part of the challenge, and you're, I'd say, unfortunately, kind of living this right now. You do that deep dive, right? You kind of get into these issues at the national level. But one of the arguments for really cutting back on that was that the finances don't work, right? And the paper wants to stay more local, I believe was the reason they gave. But how does media effectively take that deeper dive when people just don't want to pay to go behind that paywall or put forward dollars to help support, or as you noted earlier, the advertising maybe isn't what it used to be? How do those things all come together to work?
Well, that's almost the misnomer in terms of the national. I don't cover national news. The New York Times covers national news. The Washington Post, Los Angeles Times, AP. I cover Jersey news. I covered it out of Washington. When the House voted and impeached President Trump, my story was 2 Democrats vote against impeaching President Trump, one of them being Jeff Van Drew from New Jersey. When President Biden signed the infrastructure bill in, the headlines were, Biden signs $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill that says, and what a great job he did because he got bipartisan support. It shows he was able to do something that President Trump could not. My story was, Biden signed an infrastructure bill with $13 million for New Jersey, including Gateway. So that's the difference. And that's what we were doing. And it's fewer viewers in Washington, but those are stories that you don't get unless you're in Washington. I told a story. The reason when Biden first had the infrastructure bill, Senator Menendez learned about that Gateway was going to be in the bill by reading my story, because my sources at the White House gave it to me early, and I put it out. So that's the thing that's missing. We do deep dives, and frankly, a lot of the deep dives up at NJ.com, they got a lot of clicks. There was podcasts. They got a lot of support on that. I did a piece on truck safety. They got a lot of readership. It's just, what are you going to spend your money on? And you have to make a choice. And when you're in Washington, it's easier to make sure you have your City Hall reporter. That's closer to the people. It's easier to have a restaurant reviewer. A lot of people want to read on the 20 best places to get bad pizza in New Jersey, or good pizza. And Washington, unfortunately, it becomes an afterthought in a lot of those cases.
And that's a critical function of what we do, is delivering much needed news and information about those that we put in places of power, making sure that we hold them accountable, making sure that they are doing what we, in essence, hired them to do. And so when you lose that kind of coverage from that national perspective, from the how are our representatives in Washington, D.C. representing the people that put them there, you leave it up to people in positions of power to then control the narrative. So, if we're going to have a healthy, thriving democracy, we need healthy, thriving news organizations that are looking out for the best interest of in terms of truth and information.
Hey, Joe, how do you make that happen, right? I often, we talk about it's difficult to kind of go to people and say, this is what you should care about, right? And say, trust me, I'm telling you, I know this is what you should care about. I'll use that example from Jonathan. No, I want to know about the 20 best pizzas, or whatever that may be. So how do you convey that message in a way that I for lack of a better word, people find offensive of like, you're not going to tell me what I care about, but,
right,
or what I should care about. But how do you show the important role that, as you note, this plays in having a healthy democracy, which, by the way, if we don't have that, then everything else falls away. But how do you get that across to maybe a group, generally that isn't thinking in the same way?
Well, I mean, as a person running an organization, you really have to position your organization in the minds of your constituents in a way that really brings about a focus on what their information needs are. And asking people constantly and beating this question constantly is like, what are your information needs? What do you need as a mom, as a worker? What do you need in order to make the decisions that you have to make for your family on a daily basis, as a homeowner on a daily basis? I think we just, as news organizations, we just have to keep reminding people and pointing out the anecdotes that pop up constantly about how misinformation can have dramatic effects on people's lives. When you look at how local news organizations, I think, were picking up on George Santos and his difficult past, if you will, but got missed and just missed by the national media, not really picked up on the local media effort. But now you have this thing playing out where a person is in office representing people, and there's a huge trust issue there with them. So we have to keep highlighting these kinds of situations and these anecdotal information that says that the information that you need to make choices in your life is absolutely necessary, and you need to care about that. It's great to know where to get a good slice of pizza, but I also want to know what's happening with my local school board. I also want to know what's happening with federal money that's supposed to be coming here to support highways and infrastructure. These are things that I want to know about warehouses that might be popping up in my neighborhood, or toxic dump sites that might be susceptible to major storms. These are the kinds of things that people will be concerned about after the calamity has happened, that we just have to keep telling people, you need to know about this, you need to care about it, and we got to have the need and want the information.
Amanda, some of the things that Joe just noted, get at the heart, of our democracy, and talk about electing individuals to higher office, and they're coming in on a record that might not be as truthful as others. And he cited some of the pieces there at the local level. What's the argument for, we're seeing a decrease in coverage, we're seeing a decrease in funding of the press. What would you say, somebody asks you, well, how does my, my local town paper have an impact on, our democracy, or how do, you noted it before, corporations taking over media, how does that impact, my democracy? How does that put me at risk? What would you say to that, to answer that?
Well, I think what we see is that engagement with local media, strong local media presence increases civic engagement. So there's less voting in places where the local newspapers are gone. And that's really the heart of democracy, is that local level of engagement. That's where you're really able to affect the most change. If all you're doing is watching national news, and especially to Jonathan's point, national news from the perspective of national news, not from the perspective of your local community, it feels almost like entertainment. It's not something that you can actually have any effect on. And so it's really the local news, where you're seeing what's going on with your school board, what's going on with your town council, what's going on with your county commission, that you can actually then go out and vote or go to those meetings and actually make a difference. But I'll also say to Joe's point about George Santos, I think that's such a good example of why we need partnerships between the state and local news organizations and the local news organizations. Because you did have a local paper that was picking up on what was happening, and nobody else covered it, and nobody saw what was happening. And I think if you had better networks where we were working together to elevate news that becomes of state or national interest, it would serve everyone, especially as you see local coverage getting slashed at that level.
And the one thing I do love about New Jersey is there is a lot of conversation among news organizations. And so I think in some communities that don't have that interconnectivity, those kinds of conversations are hard to have. Picking up the phone to call someone else and start that conversation from from the perspective of we've partnered in the past, we've collaborated in the past. Here's something that I see that's going on. Let's talk about how we might collectively cover something like this. Think in communities where you don't have that kind of collaboration, people are in their own boxes, turf protecting. So here in New Jersey, the level at which we collaborate on either projects, promoting others' stories, I think is promising for the future of information delivery in New Jersey.
Yeah, and I think that perspective of collaboration is really the new perspective news should have. It isn't bottom line thinking and competition. It is about collaboration.
Right. And Amanda, are you optimistic? Do you see that happening, even though you noted before in one of your answers that you see a little bit of that bottom line kind of creeping in terms of corporations coming in and buying up some of the media? Are you optimistic that cooperation will continue or grow as needed?
Yeah, I think so. We're seeing that with, so we have some funding to do the Solution Journalism Collaborative, which is going really well. And I think what's great about it is, to this point about being able to call someone up, it creates trust between the local organizations and the state level organizations. So you can say, okay, we've done this together working on this one topic, and now I've got this other piece that I think would be really important for you to, it creates those relationships. And I think New Jersey's great for having that kind of, that trust, and for having an infrastructure that's building that kind of trust. Yeah.
I don't even know it's collaboration in some of this. I mean, you have to make a decision. Newsday used to have 12 reporters in Washington. They have 2 now. So you're covering congressional races. And we make the same decision. I make the same choice in New Jersey Advanced Media. There are 12 congressional races. I can't cover all 12. I can't spend 2 months up there. I got to cover the White House. I got to cover Congress. I got to cover Supreme Court. I got to cover everything else. So what's going to make a difference? George Santos was running with no money in a heavily Democratic favored race. And so if I'm the reporter, the one reporter trying to cover this stuff, I'm saying, wait a second, I don't have time for that. I've got a couple of other races which are really competitive. In Jersey, we had one race that was competitive, Tom Kaine. And against Tom Malinowski. That was the one race that mattered. And frankly, I know there was a guy, and we did a piece on him a while ago, ran against Bill Pasquale, like QAnon covers. You mentioned it a little bit. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on him. He's not going to win. He has no chance. What waste time? If he win, that's one thing, but they rarely win. And you have, I guess, for lack of a better word, I call them gatekeepers, the party committees, the super political action committees, the rating agency. I feel like we're talking about, the people that Moody's, the couple of groups that rate races, and they tell you whether it's a competitive race or not. And I get all these letters. Again, Chris Smith is a perfect example. Why are you writing about the person running against Chris Smith? Well, the House Democrats told me their candidate has no chance of winning, not going to spend any money on it. So I'm doing my readers a favor saying that's a real race, because it's not. I'm doing my readers a better race doing a deep dive into Tom Kane's background, into what Malinowski's record, Andy Kim, people like that. And that's how you make the decision. Plus, the both congressional committees, Democrats and Republicans, do a lot of great opposition research. They give you certain stories. You may want to check this out, and the reporters run with it. The DCCC, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, told me later, because I said, I never want to miss a Santa. I said, we couldn't find anything. They said they told reporters, we can't verify anything in his resume. That, to me, frankly, would be a red flag. And they didn't do it. They didn't have the people to do it. They said, we don't care. He's not going to win anyway. And he won.
To that point, too, you make some excellent observations there. And, if we're looking inward at our industry, there's a lot of work that we need to do as well. So even though many of us are not behind paywalls and we're not for-profit organizations, we're still going to play toward, what is the more exciting this, and what is the more, what more people are interested in this particular race, where we could, if we were to follow that, we could miss some very important candidates or very important storylines on races that have less interest from a either national standpoint or statewide standpoint. So I think we have to challenge ourselves to not constantly chase the clicks or the views and the viewership through what we think are more sensational races, and focus on delivering needed information to our communities.
Well, Joe, maybe to you and Jonathan, based on something that I heard from Amanda before, I thought it was spot on, talking about how in many instances there seems to be an effort. You see it especially at the national level for sure, but there is misinformation, other information that comes out that really the goal there is just to get attention, right? It's not necessarily to tell the news or share the news, but it literally is. I am, giving a spin on something because this is entertainment. I believe that was the first, the man is entertainment, right? So this is national. This is fun to watch. I'm going to watch the one that's most entertaining, right? So in that dynamic, how do you work in that system? I guess Joe and Jonathan, because Jonathan, you said something too, when you're down to this many reporters, you're down to this, I guess it almost seems like a cycle where, well, then you get less reporters if people are just watching the entertainment and not looking at the news, and then you have less money to spend, so you've got less reporters. It just seems to go round and round. How do you guys look at the misinformation out there, the entertainment value that this has turned into at some levels, and then I guess what's the obligation of press at all levels to kind of get at the heart of that, to say, no, this is entertainment. That's not news, but this is news, and this is where we need to be. So, what do you guess?
I think that this is pie in the sky, and I don't know how it happens, but there has to be a new pact between news organization and audience community, right? We're getting to a place that if we want to look at the sort of the elephant in the room with what's happening with Fox News. We're getting to a place where people only want to hear or read news and information that speaks to their personal beliefs, not really about the truth, right? And we really need a compact, and I don't know how we get there with our audiences, that we're going to promise to deliver you the truth. And you have to promise to receive that truth and do with that information what you will. But we can't serve the public good if people are only going to tune in or read things that relate to their own personal ideology. And I think that what's happening with Fox News right now is going to be the subject of many a grad level course, even an undergrad course in J schools across the country for the next 10, 15, 20 years. When you're looking at a business that is clearly about profit, clearly about building audience, and not really focused on delivering factual news and information that can help their audience make the decisions that they need to make. And they're doing it because their audience doesn't want the truth, right? And so in many cases, I don't want to speak by the entire audience, but it's proving that people are tuning in or tuning out based on whether or not the information that they're delivering meets their personal beliefs. And we have got to not fall into that trap, and figure out how we communicate with our audience that, we're going to give you the news and information, the factual information, whether you like it or not. We need you to receive that and make the decisions that you need to make on a daily basis. So I don't know how we get there, but we're I think at a dangerous place in our country as it relates to news and information, audiences, and community.
But remember, originally, newspapers were partisan. There were Federalist papers and Democratic papers. I mean, it's not called the Waterbury Republican, which still exists before, because it began as a liberal publication. What happened is, when they wrote the First Amendment, is you were going to get all these different points of view and be able to decide among yourself which is believable, what you want to do. It's a lot more. It gets magnified, frankly, on television now. But remember, Fox News, which you mentioned, is a cable station. They're not subject to any of the federal communications regulations that the over-the-air broadcast stations are. So they have from the courts, we have the lawsuit against them that the courts will make a ruling on something like that. But I also think, and I believe that, and I've said this many times, the First Amendment imposes a moral responsibility on us to hold public officials accountable to the public. I mean, you don't go to Washington. I'm in Washington. I have a desk at the Capitol, and I can go places that nobody else can go on this call, and I'm there to tell our folks what their public officials are doing. And I wish more people were interested in that. But frankly, and I don't want to pull a muscle patting myself on the back, but we had 13 of the 14 lawmakers writing a letter of protest. We had the Governor Murphy tweeting a protest tweet out saying, this is really important. This is major civic responsibility, that we need an independent press, frankly, to keep us honest and to tell people fairly and accurately what we're up to. Now there are Washington reporters get called all the time. Bureaus get closed all the time. And this is the one time that I know in my 35 years in journalism, in Washington Journal, that the lawmakers who reporter covered came out and said, wait a second, we need this person, which really is nice. I wish we could continue it. And that shows that there is some value, that even if everybody's not clicking on the latest story that I wrote, that a lot of people said there was a real value to this. And that's something we have to remember, that we're providing something they can't get anywhere else, all of us here. And I call it journalism is a calling. We don't get paid a lot. We're doing it because we believe in it. We believe in holding people accountable. We believe in making America better. And I think, Sean, you said that in your speech, in your original introduction, democracy depends on an informed electorate. We're the informers.
Well, spot on. I think everyone on this would agree. And I saw that everyone writing that the letter and signing on, and the governor, as you know, and that is powerful. And I think it's, by the way, a testament to your work. So well earned there. But maybe, Amanda, I'd go to you, and that, I think it's still a sign of the people who know how important this is, right? As Jonathan's saying, right? Those electeds, they know that this is vital to a thriving democracy. You all, you're in it. You know how important this is to a thriving democracy. What kind of things are you doing at the local level? You noted that, a vibrant local press, drives people to be more engaged in the democratic process. What specific things are you trying to do at the local level to kind of grow that empowerment in terms of an involvement, and hopefully that may be leading to an understanding of how important this work is?
Yeah, thanks. So part of what we're doing, so we're a nonprofit, and the reason we approached it from that nonprofit point of view is because we do see the news as a public resource. So, there's news as entertainment, and there's news as part of the public trust, just like Jonathan was talking about. And so with the 14 papers that we acquired, we did that through a community fundraise, first of all, and we went into different communities. We did, it was kind of at the height of COVID, so we did webinars and Zoom meetings, community meetings, to try to spread the word about the local papers, that they still existed, that they were still covering things, and why we needed the community to pitch in to try to do this fundraise. And so that was our first step with trying to engage the community. Right now, we are trying to build out community boards for each of the newspapers. So we have a governing board for the newspapers and a governing board for the nonprofit, but we'd like to get even more local and get people, not just not just the politicians, not just the people who already know how important this is, but individual community members to be involved in helping to give advice to the newspapers, with the idea that as it becomes a give and take, you get people buying in more to the news, trusting the news more, and wanting to consume it more. So that's one.
Yeah, no, that's great. And Joe, I go to you because I know you guys are doing a lot of those things, right? I know you've got a lot of those community boards and some other pieces there. What things are you doing at the state level to kind of grow the importance of this so people can kind of buy in there as well and connect, as Amanda said?
Well, we are right now heavily focused on building our infrastructure so that we can get out and cover these statewide issues and build networks around the state. We're working on more collaborations to bring more organizations together. And I don't want to go into too much detail, but we are actually applying for a planning grant with the Knight Foundation that would look at building a bit of a regional hub that would bring news organizations together in a more collaborative effort to heighten what others are doing around the state, elevating hyperlocal organizations, feeding into a common platform. So that is in the planning stages, but I think there's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of opportunity to do better reporting around the state, and we're gonna try to play a leadership role in that.
Thank you, and maybe I'll just go around the horn for last question, really. And Jonathan, I want to start with you, but yeah, obviously we've talked about the importance here, and we know certainly the challenges and some of the opportunities that are out there as well. But we also know that there are some intentional attacks going on with the press. We see it at the highest levels, whether it's, the fake press or, everything else that you hear about at some of those places. And I'm sure it has an impact. You've got people trying to restrict in ways. I guess I'd ask you in closing, what would you ask if everyone listening, they're saying, well, what can we do about this? Like, what are you saying we should do? What do you think people listening today could do fundamentally to help protect the free press, protect our democracy, and take action on their part? What would it be?
Subscribe. Advertising is down. Pay for the paywall. Give to PBS during its pledge drives. Donate to Amanda's nonprofits. Tax deductible. Spend the money. You get what you pay for. When I tweeted out, when they one of the tweets I responded, and somebody says, "Well, I don't need to pay. I can go get on Twitter and get the local news." Well, who's supplying that local news? I've been telling this all the last couple of weeks. There's this great New Yorker cartoon owned by the same company as Newhouse. It's the same company. Condé Nast is owned by the Newhouses. New Yorker cartoon is a four-legged creature in front of a computer, and the caption is, "On the internet, nobody knows you're a dog." So anybody with a computer is now a journalist. They're not trained. They're not trained in news. They're not trained in facts. They're not trained in being fair to both sides. And if you get what you pay for, and if that's what you want to get your news, you're not going to be the educated electorate we need for democracy.
Yeah, well said there, Amanda. Your thoughts?
Well, yeah, I mean, can't argue with that. Supporting the news.
Reiterate, subscribe.
Yeah, subscribe, donate. But this idea that we've all been sort of trained in the past, 10, 15 years, this idea that the news should be free, and it's true. You get what you pay for. If professional journalism goes away, then you have no way of trusting the news you're getting. And so this is the moment to step up and to really to get involved and help preserve the fourth estate.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said. There's very few things in this world that are free, including the news. Even when you think you're getting it free, your time, your eyeballs, and attention to advertisers, you're paying a price for it. So really, I just encourage people to support the things that they care about. and they can care about factual information, a good editorial process, but they care about organizations that are, trying to prevent and keep an eye on corruption, hold powerful people accountable, then you have to support it in whatever way it can. So I think it's the pact between community and news organization is very important, and we just got to keep hammering that message home.
Well, listen, I want to thank each of you for being here today, and certainly for spending some time and having this conversation. But certainly, most importantly, I want to thank you for the work you do. I mean, it is important work, and it does help our democracy. And the only way our democracy can survive is with the great work of people like you and so many others. So thank you, guys, and let's continue the efforts and hopefully keep moving that needle in the right direction. So thank you all.
Thank you.